All right, so welcome to Scrapbook Live. I am Megan Jax. Today is March 13th, and today's Scrapbook Live is all about how to convert sketches from 12 by 12 sizing when they give you the measurements on those sketches, how to convert them down to smaller sizes. If you're working with, maybe you're making a gift album that's an 8 by 8, or you're working with some vintage creative memory stuff that's 7 by 7. You could maybe are working with a happy album that is a completely different ratio. It's not even a square. And then maybe you're also diving back into some older materials, going into the 8.5 by 11. I have a few of those albums, so it's always kind of nice to, you like a sketch, you're working in a particular size of album, you just want to know how to scale things down so that you can make them work in the album that you, or the page style that you're working with for your project. So on my website at megganjax.com, you're going to want to go and find today's handout. If you are joining me live right now on Facebook, I did link it in there. Somewhere in the comments, it's going to be on there. If you are watching this later on YouTube, you will see a link in the comments below where you'll be able to get that handout. Now, if you printed your handout after I sent it out via my blog yesterday, there is going to be a typo on there. If you're just getting it closer to right now, I updated it last night. I did catch that typo. It's not a significant typo. If you've already printed it, it's easy enough to go ahead and just mark it out and make the correction. So don't worry about trying to reprint it, but you're definitely going to want to have those handouts, a pencil available. And when you're first getting used to doing this, you're going to want to maybe practice once or twice with some scrap paper. Don't do a fancy layout, stick simple. That's why the sketch we're going to work with today is off of the virtual crop from this past weekend, so the March 2024 virtual crop, and we're going to be using sketch number 2. I am going to be putting it together with some different paper so I can show you how you approach the measurements, but you may just want to follow along and maybe you'll attempt it with another layout or you'll give it a shot. So there's 4 pages to my handout. There's an additional 2 pages to Creative Memories handout. My handout, you're going to want to probably kind of keep together, especially the 3 conversion charts. You're going to want to make sure you keep those together maybe you have a binder of scrap ideas, but have those available when you need them. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to switch over to my overhead screen or my overhead camera and we will get started. All right, so here we go. I have got my handout. The mistake, if you guys are curious, if you've already printed those, if you printed those before yesterday evening, so last night I noticed that I had said 6.75 by 11, which is not the happy album ratio. It's 6.75 by 10. So if you have yours, you're just going to want to turn that into a 10. And then you'll have it good to go. So the sketch here, this initial front page of the handout shows our 12 by 12 sketch. That's sketch number 2 from the March 2024 virtual crop. And then what I've done is I took it into Photoshop and I modified I transformed it, or I warped it, or I made it fit into these other ratios. So you'll see when you take a 12 by 12 layout, when you're working with a square and you go to a 8 by 8 or a 7 by 7, or even if you're going down, maybe you're doing something crazy with a 6 by 6. Obviously, all of the proportions stay the same. It just becomes smaller and smaller. When you're going into something like an 8.5 by 11 or the happy album, which is a 6.75 by 10, now you're going to be squeezing your layout, making it, taking it from a square into a rectangle. And if you're wanting to stay true, well, I don't say true, if you're wanting to incorporate as much of the sketch as possible, you're basically going to squeeze that sketch. And so a lot of the elements you'll see here where we had square photos, those square photos start to become rectangular. Rectangles, horizontal rectangles, will start to become more square. So those are things to think about when you are working with a sketch, when you're looking at the items. So my approach, my recommendation to you when you're thinking about doing this is you can look at a sketch from 2 perspectives. You can look at it, one, from the whole sketch. You like how the photos are, you like how the background is, you like all the details of it. And just note that if you are going to be converting into one of these happy album or 8.5 by 11, you're going to be squishing it. you're going to be making it less wide. It's going to stay, you know, you're going from a square into a vertical rectangle. So your elements are going to be squeezed a little bit. So you can just know that, and you're just going to work with it as is. You're not worried about having square photos. You know they're going to turn into rectangle photos, and maybe your horizontal photos are going to turn more square-like. Anything, if you have a tall photo, like a vertical photo, it's going to become even more narrow. So that's not a big deal. You can make it work. The other approach is to consider it mostly from a background standpoint. Maybe you're not going to worry so much about the photos. You're going to just make the background. So this particular sketch has a very basic background. We just have, you know, one style of paper up here at the top. We have a different color at the bottom, and then they have a border detail across the middle. So this sketch is very straightforward. But if you're to come over and you were to imagine, say, this is sketch number 4, and I printed them off larger so that we could see them a little bit bigger here. If we were to only worry about the background, what we could see here is we would just need to have 3 pillars of paper across each layout. So the background is very straightforward, just 3 different segments of paper. And we're going to work using the conversion charts I give you. You would be able to know what sizes to make those 3 pillars, and then also what sizes to make the photos depending on the ratio that you're going to go. All right, so with that kind of stuff in mind, we're going to go ahead and dive into, I'm going to go ahead and just show you really quick. We're going to put together sketch number 2 just as it is, and it shouldn't take too long. I have almost everything pre-cut. So it has a background piece to it. And when I put these sketches together, I am following along pretty much the measurements that they give us. I am not, you know, I don't have photos. I went very, very basic, keeping it very straightforward. So we can see in this particular sketch, we have a background piece, and then they give us a measurement for the bottom piece. They tell us it is 12 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall. I do want to call out that is the first paragraph here. Typically, the first number in any sketch is going to be your width. So they tell us it's 12 inches wide, and the second number refers to the height. So the height. So this green paper, this tonal green, is 12 inches wide by 4.5 inches tall. So this gets put at the bottom of my layout. Next up, I see that we have a 1-inch border detail. So I've already cut a 1-inch border detail. I use some brown shimmer paper. And the detail here, what they really don't tell us is they don't tell us where this border goes. Does it sit right on top of the 4.5-inch piece? Or where does it go? One of the hints they give us is we need to fit a 6 by 4 photo. So it's 6 inches wide by 4 inches tall, and a 4 by 4 photo. So that's going to tell me right there that my border detail, look, it needs to sit basically at the very top edge of this bottom piece. So it's going to come in here. I am going to use some adhesive and put these pieces in place. I do not want them, when I start moving things around, I don't want this to fall apart. So I put that border on, or excuse me, the 4.5-inch tall piece at the bottom. My border detail, I know I need to be right along that edge across the top of that bottom piece. So I am just ever so slightly covering it up because I use a decorative blade when I cut this piece. The nice part about using a 1-inch detail here is I can come in with a sticker strip. I can also come in with a punched border, because you can see they have this 1-inch piece. They give the illusion with those dots, those circles on there. They want you to be able to do another kind of sticker on here. Or a border detail. So you could come in with a punch, you could come in with whatever you wanted to add on here. You could come in with some various things there. Okay, so we have our 2 photos that are going to go across the bottom, the 6 by 4 and the 4 by 4. So I'm going to go ahead and just tack these in place. I just cut, this is the new gray, the cool gray. I just cut some of it just to represent what would be photos here. a quick hint here, because when I was picking out my papers, I mean, I was just making sure whatever worked, but I wanted to go a little more tonal here. And the reason is because in this particular sketch, they don't have us using a mat at the bottom. It's not to say you can't, it's just to say the sketch doesn't have us. So I went with more of a tonal paper because then my photos will stand out from that paper. Now up at the top, this is where they have us working with some square photos again. And then they give us, we're kind of doing the faux Polaroid effect, where we have a real narrow border around the top and a little bit more space here at the bottom. They cut these mats to 4 1/4 by 5. I think my mats might be a little, nope, my mats are the right size. Yeah, 4 1/4 by 5. I was trying to use up some scraps of this brown shimmer. So making things work and just putting these photos on here. You can see these are 4 by 4 squares. So we're staying with some nice standard sizes for photos, 4 by 6, 4 by 4. You could peekaboo pocket these if you wanted to add more photos. But here you go. You can see it comes together really, really quick. I like this, these browns and greens. This is the Birds and Blossom collection. So staying with, it was released not too long ago. God, these weeks keep flying by. I'm losing track of things. So there is those. And then if I wanted to come in with a sticker, I can. But I don't know where my stickers went to. They were here. I knew which ones I was going to use, but they disappeared. But I would come across here with a sticker. This is the 12 by 12 version. So you can see here, 6 by 4, 4 by 4 looks great. All right, I do see a comment. My mom popped on here and she's wishing me and my husband a happy 25th wedding anniversary. It is. It's my 25th wedding anniversary today. My husband and I are planning to go out for dinner tonight, so we're really excited. But yeah, fun little milestone for us. We were young little chickens, spring chickens when we got married, and it's been a great 25 years full of adventures. Okay, so we have our 12 by 12 layout. So that just follows the measurements. I mean, Creative Memories has been great. They give us these measurements now when we're doing the sketches as part of the virtual crop, and it's pretty awesome. Now we're going to dive into going into an 8 by 8 because Creative Memories, they just have some new 8 by 8 albums out right now, and it's an easy way. The conversions are easy when you're going from 12 by 12 down to 8 by 8, simply because we're not, we just need to worry about one row of numbers, I guess you'll see, because it's square. There's no squishing of things, I guess. When we go into this, the next page behind here is going into square sketches. So you can see up here, this is a 12 by 12 sketch measurement conversion chart when we're working with square. It says square sketches, but really we're going to be working in the square ratio. You can see here I have 8 by 8, 7 by 7, and even taking it down to 6 by 6. So when we start diving into this, I will recommend that if you're doing it, you're going to want to have your pencil available, and you're going to want to be able to draw on your paper. So if you've printed out the sketch, it's by far going to be easier for you to print out the sketch and then to start converting your measurements. So here's my larger sketch that I've done. How this works, whatever measurement is on here, we're going to find the measurement in our 12 by 12 row. All right, so the first measurement I'm going to worry about is I'm going to worry about my 4 by 4 photos. I'm going to come down here, find 4, and I'm going to come over here to 2.67. All right, 2.67. I am going to go ahead and write that 2.67 down. Wherever it works best for you. I'm going to write it on here. You probably may not be able to see because I'm writing it on the photo and you can't really see it. But when you're doing 12 by 12, let me use here, 12 by 12, the 4 inch equals 2.67. All right. For those of you who maybe just joined in a little bit late, you can go to my website if you're looking for the handout. That is megganjax.com. And you would be able to print the handout. It is on there. It's a multi-page PDF. So you'll want to be able to go to my website at megganjax.com and then click on Scrapbook Live. It's one of the square icons, and it'll take you to the March 13th handout. So you can see here we have the 4. Over here is 2.67. Now it's a decimal. We don't like decimals because decimals, when you're using a ruler, don't really work very well. So what you're going to do is I gave you a decimal to fraction chart. 2.67 is really, really close to 0.63. So I'm going to say 5/8 inch. So when I say 2.67, that's my decimal. I'm going to go ahead and come over here and say 2 5/8 inch. So wherever on my sketch, my 12 by 12 sketch, if I'm working with an 8 by 8, my 4 by 4 photos now become 2 5/8 inch square. I'm going to tell you, when it comes to the photos, these are approximate numbers. As you know, whenever you're working with a sketch, make the size work for you. If you need to come up to a 2 3/4, you need to go to 3 inches. You can make that work. But this is simply, we're working through the numbers to convert them down to an 8 by 8 ratio that is the same overall effect as our sketch. So our 4 by 4 photos would become 2 5/8 inch. The 6 by 4 photo. Remember, my first number is my width. I'm going to find the 6 in my first column, which is my 12-inch measurements. My next column over is my 8-inch measurements, and that's where I see that it's 4. So 6 inches equals 4 inches. So convenient. So my 6 by 4 photo over here is going to become, the 6 by 4 photo is going to become a 4 by 2 5/8 inch photo. My 4 by 4 squares are 2 5/8 inch square. So there we've kind of talked about the photos. When you're converting your sketches, do not cut anything until you've done all of your measurement. You've done with your pencils. You've worked with your pencils. You've written out the measurements that you need. Okay, let's talk about the background. I know I can work with an 8 by 8 piece of paper. I know here at the bottom, just as I had this piece in green, I need a piece that's going to come across the bottom. The piece and the sketch is 12 wide by 4.5 inches tall. Well, 12 wide, we can look right here and see that 12 converts over to 8, right? Because I'm going side to side, so it's going to be an 8-inch wide piece. It says 4.5 inches tall, so I'm going to come over here where it says 4.5, and there we see it, 3. So I need a piece of paper that is 8 by 3 inches tall. That is going to be my bottom piece where I cut that green piece. The thing I need to note here is I do see that my 3 inches tall is going to be definitely taller than my 5/8 inch piece, right? I needed to make sure that my bottom piece is taller than my photos, and it is. Next up, the detail they have is that border band across the middle. They show it as, 12 inches wide, which we know is going to be 8 inches. And then they show it as 1 inch tall. So if I come back to my chart, 1 inch at the top, I can see there is 0.67 inches. Now I realize on the chart, I didn't give you anything smaller than 1 inch. So we'll see. I might just add that in there, and then you could reprint the charts if you want. Otherwise, you just kind of make it work. When it's anything under 1 inch, you just know is going to be a little bit smaller. So it says 0.67 inches, which again, coming back over, I said was 5/8 of an inch, coming back to my decimal chart. Over here, 0.67 inches. I'm going to come over here to my decimal chart, 0.63 close enough, is over here to 5/8. Now you can see 0.67 is actually kind of close. It's not quite in the middle between 5/8 and 3/4. The thing about wherever they show us using, giving the impression that we could use a border, you might want to consider not going super narrow there, because, or you may want to determine if you're going to use a decorative border element. If you're going to come in with something like a punched border, you might want to double check before you start cutting any paper. If I say this needs to be 5/8 of an inch tall, well, is 5/8 of an inch going to be wider than my punched border? Well, no, it's not. It's going to basically sit completely behind my punched border. So this is an aspect when you are converting a 12 by 12 layout into a smaller size. We can't automatically make our punches smaller. So some elements are going to possibly still need to be kind of similar to the size of the 12 by 12 sketch. It's just something to consider. Pick out those decorative elements that you cannot change the size of, that you know you want to use before you start cutting your paper, and account for those sizes. So if I know, if I wanted to come in and I want to use this border in my 8x8 sketch, I'm going to have to just give myself the leeway to make the right changes on this border detail. So I've got the last measurement conversion I need to do is I need to, the mats for my photos, 4 1/4. So 4 1/4, which is 4 1/4. So 2.83, that's how wide these pieces are going to be. If I come over here, so that's 2.83 is 2 7/8, 2 3/4, somewhere in there. We'll say 2 7/8. It's easier to cut down than it is to make larger. So 2 7/8. And then those are going to be 5 inches. They give us a measurement of 5 inches tall. And if I come over here, 5 converts to, there it is, 5 converts to 3.34. 3.34 is really close to 0.38, which is 3/8. So that's going to be 3 3/8 for my mats. All right. Sometimes you just need to give yourself a little hint there. That's my mat. Okay. So I'm going to move my 12 by 12 layout out of the way, and I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to go ahead and cut down the 8x8. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and I'm going to go cut my large piece down to an 8x8 square. I didn't have this one completely pre-cut. I knew it wouldn't take me long to get it cut down. So I'm going to cut off 4 inches, having an 8-inch piece over here, rotate and also cut it 4 inches. Here's my 8x8 piece. Now, across the bottom here, I need an 8x3 band of paper. So I have this lovely blue. I thought that would look so pretty here. And here's where I mentioned before, I want to use a tonal piece across the bottom because there's no mats down here. I want my photos to stand out. They really won't pop by themselves off of the striped background, but by putting this tonal piece at the bottom, they will. And since my photos up at the top have mats, they'll be able to pop off of the patterned paper here. So this needs to be 3x8. So I'm going to go ahead, cut this down to 3 inches. And I'm going to cut off 4 inches. It is a 12-inch piece. If I need it to be 8 inches wide, I can just cut off 4 inches. So here is this piece. Now, if I wanted to come in with my measurement where they tell me 5/8 of an inch, 8 inches wide by 5/8 of an inch, that is this border detail there. I'm going to go ahead and cut it at 5/8 of an inch. It's just over 1/2 inch. Just so we can see what it looks like. Cutting off that 4 inches to give me that piece there. That sits at the top, on the top edge of that bottom piece. Now I do have some little pieces already cut. And here's where I'm going to tell you I made a little bit of an adjustment. I have learned over time that when I am working with my my photos here, I think I went ahead and I cut the squares to the 2 5/8. Actually, I think, you know what? I made the changes on the happy album. On this one, I stayed the same. I stayed the same measurements. It's a happy album that I made some adjustments. So I've got some 2 5/8 inch squares. So I need to go ahead and cut some mats. I'm going to cut them with the shimmer paper. Remember my mats, they're going to be 2 7/8 inches wide, which is nice because that's a 1/4 inch larger than my photos. So I'm going to have an 1/8 of an inch mat all the way around 3 sides, and then I'll have a bit of chunk at the bottom for that faux Polaroid look. So 2 7/8. If you are converting sketches, you will probably want to make sure you're comfortable with things like the 1/8 inch marks on your trimmer. It's almost impossible to stick to our 1/4 inch increments. Doing this, you're going to want to make sure that you're comfortable with that. And then I'm going to come down to 3 3/8. So 3, and then you count over 1, 2, 3/8. So not quite all the way to 3 1/2. See, we got that nice Polaroid effect. I will admit in this particular size, it's probably going to be difficult to put too much journaling down here, but you probably could still do, we have some various little thin sticker things that you could do across the bottom if you wanted to. Like I said, this is just about making the sketch work with this particular size. So there we go. We're starting to see how that sketch takes shape. But remember, if I wanted to come through with a border detail, I just have to, account for that sizing. This shows a 5/8 inch tall strip across the 8 inch width, but if you're going to punch a border or use a decorative border across there, you might need to use something a little bit different to do that. I am looking to see what I have. If I wanted to come in with one of the laser cut borders out of birds and blossoms, you just see that it's going to be different on your sizing. But it's all easy enough. If you just dry fit everything, it's easy to move things around. So don't let that stop you from doing it. But this particular sketch does convert really well to the different sizes, or down to that 8x8. If you're working with a 7x7, like I've mentioned, like the vintage Creative Memories, you would just need to use the 7-inch column. Everything else is the same concept. You find your 12-inch number. You then find the corresponding number that goes with the size of square that you're working with, and then write your measurements down, and then you can start to cut your pieces. All right, I do need to tack this down really quick. When I tell you to dry fit to make sure everything looks good, then you have to obviously come back in and put things all together. You can, of course, have made some adjustments to how you do your pieces. I didn't have to use a full 8x8 piece for the background. I could have pieced together my background. It works great if you're working on the 8x8 page itself. But remember, we do have top loading pages for 8x8. So you could just build it as such and then drop those right in. I am so excited that we have those top loading pages. How many of you have done some 8x8s? I have put together a few of them. I wasn't sure how I felt about them, but they come together so like lickety split. I did a little baby one for Cody for his first year. I did an 8x8 album for Cody also of a really long, extensive road trip that we took. Just thought it'd be a fun little book for him. Basically, they're just photos of him and the specific things he did. I wasn't worried about showing everybody in the family. I just wanted it to be a little memory book for him so he can remember. He was 7 maybe when we did that trip. And when you're 7 years old, you kind of remember things, but you kind of don't. And so really being able to have that book for him to go through and be able to remind himself will help keep those memories fresh for him. All right, so there we go. We can see Here's an 8x8 version of our 12x12 sketch. All right. Now we are going to dive into the happy album version of this. So we're going to want, there is another sheet. The one after that, or somewhere in there, you should see it says happy album, which is 6.75 wide by 10 inches tall. This is where it gets very important for us to remember that our first, let me get some things where I can write for you. Our first number on our sketches is our width. All right, that's the first number. So our first number, when we say happy album size 6.75 by 10, our happy album is 6.75 or 6 3/4 inches wide. How tall is it? By its height, which is 10 inches. All right. So we will see here, we have 2 rows of numbers, right? There's 2 rows. We have our, well, there's actually 3 columns of numbers, 3 columns of numbers. We see our 12x12. So this is the 12x12 is going to be the number that is on your sketch. When you're looking at a sketch, and we need to convert our 4x4 photo. Remember, our 4x4 photo is going to be a rectangle on our sketch, or a square on our sketch. It's a 4-inch square. But by the time we convert it, remember up here is a square. By the time we convert it over here, look, it has been squished into a rectangle because we are literally taking our sketch and we are making it narrower, and about 2 inches, we're squishing it down a little bit. So we're taking a square and we're converting it to a rectangle. So we have to, our 4-inch square, if the first number is a 4, it's a 4x4, our first number, it is going to be 2.25 inches wide. Do you see that? 2.25, so 2 1/4 inches wide. So it's 2 1/4 inches wide. Now, we always, when we're talking about our second number, when working with the happy album, we need to come down to the 10-inch column. In this particular case, I am going to go back to my 4, and my 4-inch tall photo is now going to be 3.33, which is really close to, we could say 3 3/8. All right, so it's no longer a square. Now let's look at our 4x6, or our 6x4 photo. These are measurements you're going to see a lot, your 4x4 photos, your 6x4 photos. You know, the 6x4, if you rotate it the other direction, it's, you're going to see things. So we have a 6x4 photo. So I am 6 inches wide. So I'm going to come here to 6. And it's 3 3/8. The 3/8 is 3/8 inch. So 3 3/8 inch tall. I can tell you it's going to become a little more square-like. So it's 3 3/8 inches wide. Now what is 4 inches tall? I'm going to come over here to 3.33. Because remember, my second number is my height. So it's 4 inches. It's a 6x4 inch photo. So I'm going to go to 4 and I'm come to my second column, which is my height, and it's 3.33, which again, I've already said I'm going to mark to 3 3/8. So essentially for this conversion, it is taking a 6x4 photo and we're basically squeezing it into a square. Really quick, let's just take what it looks like. We don't have a 4x6 photo on this particular layout where it is 4 inches wide by 6 inches tall, but it's just going to become even narrower So 4 inches wide, we know is 2 1/4. Oh, I did this. Wait, just a second. No, I did it right. Never mind. 2 1/4, because I'm staying in my height column. 2 1/4. Now I need to take 6 here, and I need to find it in my second column, my height column, and it's 5. All right, so a 4x6 vertical photo gets smushed even narrower to 2 1/4, but it doesn't really get smushed much in height, because really we're only squishing it down by 2 inches, versus on the width, we're almost going in half. You know, we're really that 12 inches to squeeze it down to 6 3/4 inches, we are really compressing it quite a bit, whereas not so much compressing top to bottom. All right, so we'll keep practicing those conversions. I'm gonna switch over here to, I should have printed this sketch again, the larger version of it. I only have the little version now to work with. We are gonna go ahead and do this again. If you need to, what you can come in here on your Happy Album conversion chart, and you can write at the top, if it's helpful for you, you can come in with a W above the 6.75 and an H above the 10. And as long as you are working with the Happy Album in a portrait mode, which portrait means it's vertical. It's, you know, it's 6 inches wide by 10 tall. This will work. If you rotate it for some reason, or you're working with 8.5 by 11 and you rotate it, you have switched your numbers. Your width is now 10 inches and your height is 6.75. I know people sometimes do that when you're working with those rectangular albums. Sometimes you switch it and you just have a different orientation. So if you rotate your albums that are rectangular, you're going to switch your heights and your widths. So you just need to make sure you keep that in mind. Most of the time, though, you're going to be working with your width being 6.75 and your height being 10. So you can see there, see I wrote W and H above. All right, so let's do some conversions of this sketch into a Happy Album. So I'm going to use a red pen on this, so hopefully it will show up a little bit better. I already talked about my photos. My square photo is going to come into my 4x4 photos are going to be 2 1/4 by 3 3/8. All right. 2 1/4 by 3 3/8. I could also maybe do them down here on this one. So 4 by 4 equals 2 1/4 by 3 3/8. This 6 by 4 photo, I already said, was pretty much going to turn into a square. 3 3/8 by 3 3/8. And this 4 by 4 photo keeps the same measurement. I actually am going to have 4 photos that are that 4 by 4 conversion, and I'll have 1 photo that is the 6 by 4 conversion. A big measurement we need to know is that bottom piece, how big that piece is at the bottom of the sketch. So it's 12 inches wide, which when I come over here, the sketch tells us it needs to be, the measurements on the sketch are 12. So the width is 12, which is going to be 6.75. It's going to go clear across my page. So this piece right here is what I'm talking about. So it's going to be 6 3/4 inches wide. And how tall is it going to be? Well, they tell me 4.5 in my sketch. So if I go to 4.5 and I need to come over to my height, it's 3.75. You see that there? So 4.5. I'm going to convert it to my height, which is this column, the third column in, and right there, 3.75. So which is 3 3/4. All right. Again, I know this band across the middle is going to be 6 3/4 inches wide. It needs to go the entire width of the layout. And how tall it is, it's 0.83. It's my very first, it's 1 inch tall, as indicated on the sketch. I'm going to convert it over into the column with the 10 for the height, and it's 0.83. That is about 7/8 of an inch. So it's really close to 1 inch. I'll probably just leave it at 1 inch. That gives me a little bit more ability if I want to add some decorative detail there. Again, that's an element I probably would worry about last, or if I'm coming into this the page knowing there's a certain element I want to use, a sticker, a punched border. I probably know at this size I'm going to be working with nothing larger than a border maker cartridge, maybe a laser cut border. Sometimes those are a little bit taller. Okay. So now what I need to do is one last measurement I need, which is going to be the mats. So they are 4.5 inches wide. I'm going to come over here to 4.5. It says 2.53. So I'm just going to say 2.5 or 2.5. I'm writing down on my thing that these are the mats. And 5 inches tall. So I'm here to 5. Over here in my height column, I can see that should be 4.17, which is a little bit bigger than 1/8. It's not quite 1/4 of an inch, the 0.17, but I'm actually going to say it's 1/4 of an inch only because I will be able to cut that down if I need to. Whenever you're doing these measurements, it's always better maybe to err on the side of a little bit bigger, and you can trim down. So that would be 4 1/4. All right. Really the only measurements that are kind of absolute when you're working with the smaller sizes are your height when you're going across the entire page. So 6.75 inches wide. I don't need to make it 7 inches wide. I know it's going to have to be smaller than that. When it's going up to the height of 10 inches, I know I can't go any taller than 10 inches total. So there's no reason to cut something at 11. Okay, so now that I've got these for the most part done, I am going to put this together. So let's see what my plans were. All right, I am venturing out into the National Scrapbook Day. I think this is part of the accessory pack. This paper that has the wood grain on one side. It's kind of this really pretty green on the other side. And I thought it would look nice maybe if I just put a band of the from the Birds and Blossom. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead for this particular layout. I am going to piece my background together a little bit just because I wanted to use both sides of this particular paper. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and cut this down to size of a happy album page, which is 6 3/4. So 6 3/4 wide. And it needs to be, well, if I cut it to 10 inches tall, and then I can cut my paper off, I'll just do that. And I'm going to have to paper weld. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my bottom piece, because remember, we're using the reverse side. So I'm just going to cut off a piece of this that is 3 3/4 inches tall. Remember, I've already done my measurement here. My bottom piece is going to be 6 3/4 inches wide by 3 3/4 inches tall. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off a piece that's 3 3/4. And then I should be able to overlap. So I'm going to just piece this together. I'm going to put my background piece up here at 10 inches. I know it's no taller than 10 inches. And then this bottom piece, I'll be able to put on so that it's flush at the bottom. And this overlap, instead of paper welding it, I'll just be able to overlap it. So I'll come in here across the bottom. As long as I stay lower than 3 3/4, it should be fine. There we go. So here you can see, Happy Album is very rectangular. That's what I mean. Look how much we've had. You can really see how much we've had to distort a 12 by 12 photo by having this, how I have this laid out here. Look how much we've had to squish all of that stuff into this size, but we've only had to squish a little from top down to bottom. right? But here's really where you can see that the reason we're squishing that 12 by 12 square layout into a rectangular layout. So I need a piece to go across the middle here. I'm going to go ahead and cut a 1-inch piece with this. Actually, I have a punched border, so we'll leave that for now. It's about 1 inch tall. I'm going to dry fit that. Next up, my photos. So this is an example where I talked about maybe you only want to consider the background, right? Happy albums, because of how much we've changed, and it's really true for 8x8s as well, is you need to maybe be able to get your photos cropped down from 4x6s into 6x4, or 4x6s into smaller photos. There are some great ways to do that. I've talked about them before, where you can use apps like Project Life app. You can make little collages on a 4x6 and then you cut them apart. But you really are going to want to be able to work in smaller photos. You can work in larger photos. Don't get me wrong. You can put a 4x6 photo on here. Let me see if I can show you. They actually do work really nice. A 4x6, let me see. This is 4 inches wide, and I'm just going to cut this to 6 inches because I want to show you. A 4x6 photo does really work nicely on here, and you can see it fits nicely. You could come in here with a vertical one. You have some room for journaling, things like that. So don't be scared to use 4x6s in your happy album. But imagine if we need to get more photos on here, we could have made this 4x6 actually a collage of photos that we either keep together as a collage or we cut the collage pieces apart. So I am not going to work with a 4x6 because I want to show you we're trying to get ourselves to this point right here. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've cut some gray cardstock to represent the photo. This first piece here that I did is 3 3/8 inch square. Yeah, it worked out just going 3 3/8 inch square. The next piece they had, the photo we were coming into was going to be our 4x4 photos were really getting squished into a 3 3/8 inches tall. Yeah, 3 3/8 inches tall by 2 1/4. I made a little bit of a decision when I was cutting these to cut them to 2 1/2. Personal decision there. It's just because I thought they were getting kind of narrow. And so I thought it might be easier to have them closer to 2 1/2. And this is the kind of adjustment you'll find yourself making when you're starting to work with some of the smaller elements on these sketches, that you need to adjust to what size works best for you, what works best for your photos. You can see here when I put these at the bottom, my height is the same. So I have a 3 3/8 inch height, 3 3/8 inch square photo here. This over here is the same height because in my sketch, you can see my bottom photos are the same height. And I could have had it been a little bit narrow, but I also knew based on my sketch that I had room to go just a little wider if I wanted to. I only went like a 1/4 inch wider. But I repeated that same 1/4 inch because in the sketch, this photo, and this photo are all the same size. They don't have to be, but they are. So what I did is I cut my other photos the same. So I have all 3 of those are the same size in here. I had to write down my numbers. And now the thing is when I adjusted the size of my photos, I needed to adjust the size of my mats. So one of the things to know when you're working with mats, because photos are probably one area where we do the most adjustments of a sketch, or it can be the area, right? We can't maybe get our photos cropped down to the size that they tell us, and we need to make it work. So then you're left with, how do I make a mat to go with my photo? All right. So what you can do is my photo, let's get a piece of paper here. My photo that I ended up trimming is 2 1/2 inches wide by 3 3/8 inches tall. Okay, this is my little rectangular photo right here. I need a mat that's going to go around it, and it's going to be, I don't want it too wide here, but I do want it to come down. I want that same faux, what's it called? The Polaroid look. So I want it to be, you know, a little bit longer here, but I don't want it to be very much wider. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to add 1/8 of an inch or a quarter inch width to it. So I'm going to take from 2.5 to 2 3/4. That's going to give me 1/8 of an inch on either side. Now the height, I need a little bit of room down here. The quickest way to do it is maybe just to add 1 inch, and then you could just trim it off if you needed to. Like you could come to 4 3/8. I think, what did I end up with? I don't remember I'll have to measure. I already have it cut. What did I end up at? I ended up going just a little over 1/2 of an inch. I took it all the way to 4 inches here. So you just have to find the measurement that works for you. If you're comfortable using your trimmer, you might want to go ahead and bring that all the way to 4 inches. And then you can trim it down if you think it's too much, or excuse me, 4 3/8, 4 3/8, add it by a whole inch. If that's too much, then you can just use your rotary trimmer or even your personal trimmer and take it down just a little bit. I ended up doing 4 inches. So my photo here is, or my mat is 2 3/4 inches wide by 4 inches tall for this particular layout. And I have 2 of those. So the apps to do the collage, there's a couple different. Project Life is an app that is pretty popular to use. It should be a free app. There are premium upgrades you can get, but to make some basic collages, you can do just the free version. If you want a little bit more options, there are some other apps out there, but things like Pixcollage, but a lot of those will have a watermark on them when you go to export them, unless you pay for the premium version. If I have a Epson PM400 and printer, it's a personal photo printer, and I am able to use their Epson Creative Print app to print some photos or make collages. And so that is using the Creative Print app from Epson. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do on this. I'll tack this down for now. Just putting that border on there. Use some scissors, come across, but you can see how it's taking shape. Very cute. It's almost like little wallet size photos would fit on there. So I know there was a question up here that somebody asked. I'm scrolling back up. So yeah, I see somebody talking about using some of the old landscape albums. For sure, they do have. I didn't go with every size. I didn't convert up to a 12 by 15, but hopefully you guys can see the possibilities here with the different sizes. So let me come back in and show. We're going to compare these sketches or the finished layouts. So we started off with our 12 by 12, following just the measurements that they gave us. There's room for title, embellishments, and all sorts of detail. Obviously, when you're working with a 12 by 12, you have a lot more blank space. Most everything Creative Memories designs is really meant to go 12 by 12, so embellishments are sized for that size. When you start to scale down, when you come into a 8 by 8, you can see we're a little bit smaller space. Our band across the middle here is a little bit smaller. There's still details you can make work. And then really seeing how things can get squished and changed when we do the happy album. and how everything, it gets a little bit distorted. Obviously, when the sketch itself gets distorted because you're working with your photos that have already been printed, nothing else. It's not like you're actually squishing the paper and so forth. So all of your patterns, everything stays nice. It's just, you're going to have to think about the sizes for your photos and so forth. So, all right. I really hope that wasn't too confusing, that these guides are helpful for you going forward. And, just remembering to do your measurements first. If you are needing to combine measurements, maybe do one, so sometimes they will give us like 3 pieces of paper that they want us to work together. And you're kind of like, how do I do this? Actually, I want to show one last quick thing because I want to talk about that. And there's a good example of how to do it in in the sketches. So really quick, I'm going to go back to my table and talk about it really quick. Sketch number 4, they showed us has 3 different bands of paper across it. They're 4-inch wide bands. And so there's 3 segments across the paper. So if we were to go into our 8x8 conversion, and I've got to find that paper. Where's my squares? There it is. My 8x8. So when I convert an 8x8, these 4-inch bands, because remember, as you see, they're 4x10.5, 4x10, 4x10.25. My 4-inch width, I go to my measurements and I'm converting this to an 8x8, 4 inches, 2.67. Oh, and 2.67 is really close to 2 5/8. Now, the thing is I need 3 equal pieces to come across this, right? So I don't know, is 2 5/8, if I have that 5 or 3 times, is that going to fill a whole 8-inch width? No, I'm pretty certain it's not going to. So this is going to be, I mean, I could tell you it's going to be 6, it's going to be short. It's going to be short about an 1/8. It's going to be about 1/8 of an inch short is what it's going to be. It's because that is 6 15/18, which is 7 7/8. Just to remind you guys, I love fractions. I just do. Okay, so my mind can handle them. I know you guys are like, what? Don't worry if it's not. What I'm telling you here is, in this particular case, I mentioned in the initial guide, when converting the numbers from decimals to fractions, you may lose or gain a bit of dimension. If you are combining cuts of paper to expand across an entire layout, you may want to err on the side of a little too big versus a little too small. Okay, so here, the 2 5/8 is going to be a little too small. So if I cut everything at closer to 2 3/4, 2 3/4, what I can do is I can place my first piece in the middle. I can place my 2 pieces on the outside. And if I don't want any overlap, I can just trim off what overhangs the outside edge. All right. So I would be able to cut everything to 2 3/4 inches wide, place my first piece in the middle, either overlap a little bit to make to keep it all within the 8-inch width, or I would be able to just let it overhang and cut off what overhangs. So that is the trick there, because we want to cover our entire width of our background. We want the full 8 inches covered. And so by, cutting our pieces and overlapping, you just, should be able to hopefully make that work out. But just remember, you can always trim things smaller than you can to make things larger. And if you really need to, that is where it's really nice. I'm going to tell you guys what is nice about working with an 8x8 or even the Happy Album, even 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, like printer paper, bills. I mean, everything that we get a lot of scrap paper coming in a size that you can start practicing cuts and so forth with just stuff you throw in the recycle bin. So grab those pieces of paper to be able to make cuts that you're not sure of before you cut your pretty paper. When we're working with 12-inch, we don't have a lot of just random 12-inch pieces of paper. It's usually all of our scrapbooking stuff, but things that are smaller for the 8x8s and the happy albums, those we usually have plenty of paper to grab some scrap stuff to work with to make sure that you like how things are going to fit. So before you start chopping up your really pretty scrapbook paper, chop up that electric bill, or if you're still getting bills. I mean, I get a lot of stuff e-delivered to my bank or whatever, but you know what I mean. You'll find places to find scrap pieces of paper to help with these. So I think that's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, hopefully it's a good resource for you. I know that virtual crops can sometimes take a little bit of time. There was a tricky one they have with the pieces. They're coming down. Very cool. Saw so many great examples of that one. And so it's always a delight to see what you guys are creating. I do see a lot of, they pop up in my feed. I have been this last weekend, next weekend, the following weekend, all my weekends are really felt like they're packing. Just getting the house ready for our move. We're going to be moving to Arizona in this summer. And so we're working on getting our house ready to sell and all that stuff. And as you know, after living in a house for a while, especially when you're a scrapbooker, I mean, my scrapbook stuff alone is pretty crazy. But things coming up. We did Power Hour last night. I will be back next week for with Scrapbook Live. I don't know what we're going to do next week, but I'll have something. And I hope everyone has a chance to put this to use at some point. Maybe it will help you if you're thinking of diving into a happy album, or you're thinking of diving into a 8x8, but you just were a little bit like, well, I really like working with sketches and I don't want to have to, maybe this will open that door for you a little bit there. So, I don't think I have any there's not a, next Friday will be a preview Friday, I think. I think there is one last little thing at the end of the month before we dive into April, but it should be a lot of fun. So I do see a question from Marla. Yes, this was recorded. I do record Scrapbook Live. So if you joined me late, or if you had to leave early, but you're not here anymore, you can catch all the recording. I'll have it posted here fairly shortly onto my YouTube channel. And then of course, Facebook has it available you can watch the whole kit and caboodle. So, all right. Take care, everybody. I will see you next week. Send me messages if you have questions on anything. And I look forward to seeing what you convert. If you do convert something, tag me in the post. I would love to see it. I'd love to see you guys putting these charts into action. It's just a lot of fun to do. All right. Take care. I will see you next week.